why black-footed ferrets are so endangered today because of our efforts to poison the prairie dog. And the prairie dog then is 94% of the diet of black-footed ferrets. And so we almost killed them off. In fact, they were thought to be extinct for about 25 years. And a small colony found, and now they have them in a captive breeding program, and they're starting to reintroduce them. In fact, just north of here is one of the most successful reintroduction sites. But anyway, getting back to what this third one says is that the people themselves said, we don't want to kill them off. We want the researchers to find what is the proper balance. We recognize that they're out of control with their population. So we want them controlled. We want the research to show what is the proper balance between prairie dogs and the rest of us that live in the ecosystem. I thought that was the most wonderful thing that the people could come up with. That they weren't so radical that they just, across the board, said, kill them off. Now, you go and you talk to the tribal council up there, and they've adopted that philosophy already. Kill them off. Okay, but the people themselves, the ones that own the land, they say, we don't want this. So this is some of the, I had a whole bunch of stuff that my colleagues gave me, and I just kind of picked through some of the stuff and put it in this slide or in this presentation. You know, this shows that the focus groups, they agreed on one big thing, and that was the land renewal effort. We need to fix our land. And that's something that Todd talked about, that's something that, you know, the other gentleman from down in Queens talking about, is when you're talking about grassland, you know, the ranchers need to be cognizant of the fact that they're growing grass, they're not growing cattle. They need to manage that grass rather than manage their herd to a certain extent. Anyway, so this is some of the preliminary findings of our efforts to go through the focus groups. While you're reading some of that, if you're interested at all in it, let me say this, that the background of this project is that some of the people from the Agricultural Research Service, some of our faculty got together one time at a big meeting like this and said, we need some help. And so consequently it started writing this up, writing a grant proposal up, getting money to do the focus groups, getting money to lease some land, getting all that together, and then a large grant proposal was put together that it included all the collaborative groups. So it come down to a 5-year, multi-year grant that will probably extend into another 5 years, and maybe another 5 years after that. We hope, anyway. So what ended up happening was Sitting Bull College is the host of the grant, and so we rented a 5,000-acre ranch right there in Marteau. And some of you people may know the people that owned it a long time ago. Now their kids own it, Pat and Virginia McLaughlin. Very well-known people. Pat was a former chairman. Somehow they passed it on to their kids that they wanted something like this done with their land. They didn't want their kids to just make a bunch of money on it. They wanted them to do something worthwhile for the community with this land. And so this is what we all come up with. Some more recommendations that the focus groups made. And so Pat and Virginia were very well-known horse people. They had very good horses, big herds. And so these horses, I don't know if you guys know this, but the animals that are the hardest on the grasslands, especially in modern days when they're penned up, is horses. And so they hammered the heck out of this creek area. Up in the hills where there's no water, They didn't get up in there too much. Way in the far end where there was no water at all, the horses never got up in there. So you're looking at up in the hills above this creek is some fairly healthy grasslands, but down on the bottom is almost all prairie dogs. Big, big villages of prairie dogs. And so what we did was we decided, okay, we're going to build an all-natural beef system. What does that mean? It means grass-fed beef. What the focus group said they wanted was they wanted us to build a herd and build a system where the calves are born, the calves are raised on the place, they're weaned, and they're fed out to butcher weight on the place. And then they're butchered and slaughtered and processed. They wanted us to ask the tribe if they would create a small processing plant. And the tribe said, absolutely, we'll do that. You make this model happen and we'll do this. So that's in the works. Then the people wanted us to make sure that local people were hired in this processing unit. And that the meat there was packaged and taken to the local grocery stores on the reservation and sold locally and consumed locally. What I studied in as an undergraduate was I had to read this book called Small is Beautiful. Well, someone knows it. A couple of people actually know. An economist named E.F. Schumacher. And Dr. Schumacher's hypothesis was that when you have pockets like reservations and you produce a raw material, well, the bigger country comes in and takes the raw material and they take it to someplace, like in the case of our beef, they take it from our ranches here and take it to someplace like Omaha or Texas, feed them, produce a raw material, process it into a finished product, and then bring it back here and sell it to us for 4 or 5 times the amount of that it was worth when it left. That's exactly what Mr. Duchesneau was talking about not more than 3 hours ago. Dr. Schumacher called that internal colonization. Okay? So we need to start thinking about this whole business, and I'm eternally grateful to Marcy and others, I'm sure, that helped put this together to talk about food sovereignty. Because that's what we're trying to do here, is create a system where it's produced locally, processed locally, and consumed locally. So objective 1 is to collect and analyze baseline data on the rangeland ecosystem of the range. It's a much degraded system, so we decided we need to collect baseline data. I'm always one who wants to explain what baseline data means. I know that there's a lot of you in here that probably already understand it, and it's probably very basic to you, but there's some in here that may not know what that means. And what that means is when you start a project, you collect data on all the components of that system so that you have a beginning point that you can measure. Okay, the grass was this point. 5 years from now, when we collect more data on the grass, we can see the grass either got better or got worse, or it stayed the same, according to what we started with. So we're collecting baseline data on all aspects of the ecosystem right now. That we're also doing research on some itinerant herds of steers that we have. We're using them as a baseline data collection phase. But our main mission right now, we just started this spring, is to begin establishing a base herd that would become the ranch herd that will produce the calves, that will stay on the ranch, that will end up being processed there. So we're just starting that. In this spring, we bought 18 head of heifers, and we're calving them now. And as we go, we'll just keep contributing till that herd becomes several hundred head. But for the time being, what we're doing is we're using steers, yearling steers, to measure growth, to measure animal nutrition, to measure a lot of different things. So we have 4 experimental pastures, and we divide these steers up into these pastures. And we're looking at what is the impact of the prairie dog on weight gain, or animal nutrition, or what have you. That's one of the things we're doing. When you talk about this project to anybody in the community, they automatically go, oh, you're working on that prairie dog project, huh? It's so much more than just prairie dogs, but that's what we're looking at. And so we've got 4 pastures. One has 0 prairie dogs, or near 0 prairie dogs. Another one has about 33%. Another one has 66%. Another one has about 90% prairie dogs. And so we've got a wide spectrum of how we're gathering. We've got 36 exclosures spread out throughout those 4. Exclosures are fenced in areas 100 foot by 100 foot so that the cattle can't go in there and graze. Nothing can go in there and graze unless it's a deer that jumps over, which is entirely feasible. We're trying to keep prairie dogs out of them, because prairie dogs are a big herbivore just like cattle are. Okay? They're the second, well, maybe the first numerous herbivore on the prairie. And so you have to take into account that. So, but right next to the fenced-in exclosures, we've got what's called a non-exclosure. That's just 4 points that are marked there with no fence, and the cattle can graze across it. So that's how we compare the grazing that the cattle are doing to the exclosed area where they can't go in and graze. So we're looking at the health of the grass. We're looking at a lot of different things. I'm getting ahead of myself with my slides here, but this is a picture of one of the steers, and you see he's got a collar on him. This collar is nothing more than a GPS a unit inside the collar. It's made so it can withstand any kind of impacts or whatever. So every Friday, last summer, for 5 months, every Friday we gathered each of the 4 herds and downloaded the data from these GPS collars. Only 4 or 5 in each herd had them. But what these GPS collars do is they actually track in the pasture exactly where that steer goes. If he goes over to that corner, it measures how long he's over there. Then they come over here, it measures that. How long is he in what areas of this pasture? We've even gotten one where they lift up their head, they graze. Head up, head down. And so that's the data we're gathering, okay? What we're looking at is how much time do they spend on prairie dog towns, how much do they not? Okay? We're finally starting to get a little bit of data back on that. So, but anyway, so this is some of the baseline data that's being collected right here. We need to figure out all of this so that we'll know where we're at in 5 years, 10 years down the road, so that we can actually do this system. It's basically too early to really say anything conclusive about our research. But we're taking vegetation samples, we're studying plant communities, we're studying densities, plant densities, we're studying the prairie dog, we're studying the effects of cattle on grassland-dependent bird species. I don't know if you know this, by the way, but grassland-dependent bird species like prairie dog, meadowlarks, hornlarks, etc., those ones that sit in the prairie and go, their populations have declined 60-some% since 1965. 60-some% they're down. So we're trying to figure out, well, what's causing this? Is it cattle? Overeating the grasslands? What is it? Well, there's been recent research that shows different bird species like different kinds of heights of grass. Some like it just as smooth as this floor here. Some of them like grass that tall, taller. So it's not that so much. So we're looking at what's going on there with them. They're doing transects with going so many meters off of that transect and looking for nests and trying to determine why those eggs in those nests are not successfully hatched, so to speak. Those kinds of things. One of the greatest joys in my life has been when I would accept some kind of like a invitation to come and speak to children about grassland. And I mentioned bird species to these kids, and they all start looking around in the trees. And well, wait, where are you looking? Look down here. Look in the grass. And about that time, a bird will go right down into the grass. And they're all sitting there going, they don't understand that the native birds here are the ones that live in the grasses. The ones in the trees, for the most part, are those that come from elsewhere. They don't know that. And I'm sure there's native species that live in the trees too, but I got no use for them. So basically, we're getting down to, and I've talked about a lot of this already, but these are just some photos that I threw in. These are some of the grad students along with the undergrads. The grad students are bringing the graduate students, the graduate students are bringing along the undergrads and learning these techniques, which that's what it's all about right there. And so, and so the ruminant study, this is called a fistula, where they put a hole in the side of the animal and they put a little rubber thing with a door in the side, and then they come along and they will take out all the contents of the stomach and put it in this trash can, and then they'll take this animal with nothing in its ruminant and take it out there and let it graze for an hour or two. And then they bring him in, and then that's their sample. They clean that stomach out again, and that's their sample to find out what that animal is eating. So they can't just leave it go like that. So they take that sample and preserve it. Then they have to take what was originally in the ruminant and put it back in there, because that's where the microbes are. And without the microbes in the stomach, that animal will die. So they have to put it back in there. Then close the door and let them out for a couple weeks, and then they'll do that again. So this is one of the students, interns that I worked with last summer, and she looks like she's having a good time. So I put that in there. Me, I draw, I'm a scientist, but you know what? I draw the line sometimes. Say, that's just against Tunkashala's ways. And this is one of them. I will not go around when they're doing this, and they make fun of me. No, this is against Tunkashala's laws. You ain't getting this in you to hang out there and touch that stuff and abuse that animal. So this is some of the animals with their collars on. Basically, it tracks when they're on towns, preyed out towns. So, like through triangulation of research methods, we're starting to find out, they spend more time during July on the prairie dog towns, and they've obtained more nutrition, better nutrition when they're on the prairie dog towns than when they're out here eating grass. Why is that? And so, they don't know this, but I'm an old buffalo guy, and buffaloes have hung out on prairie dog towns for thousands and thousands of years because that's where the best food is for them. When those plants are growing, and as soon as they get tall like that, the prairie dog run out there and chew it down. And it keeps growing, and chew it down. All summer, one plant is trying to grow. And that's called a vegetative state. And when a plant is in a vegetative state, it's got higher nutrition than if it grew all the way and then stopped growing, like grass does. Okay? And so the old bison knew that, and they go there and they eat the weeds on the prairie dog town. The pronghorn does the same thing. And then they don't have to expend as much energy to get the same amount of nutrition. Okay? They don't have to go chasing all over the prairie to get the same amount of nutrition. So that's a it's too early to really say that's conclusive, but we're getting there. Okay, we're getting there. And I had a meeting with the president of our college the other day, and she asked me about that. And I went, yep, that's what's going on. She thought that was the greatest thing in the world because she said all these ranchers are just going to have to swallow their pride and just admit that, well, maybe there is a use for prairie dogs after all. So these are just a few. I shouldn't even be sharing these, but I couldn't come here without saying, this is what we're finding, okay? Even though it's only 1 year of data collection, the samples are so small it doesn't mean nothing. All of you who are scientists understand this, so forgive me if I overspeak my bounds, but one of the things that they found, which astounded me, was that the greatest predator for the grassland-dependent bird nest eggs was the 13-line ground squirrel. Oh man, I never would have thought of that, ever. But you look out there, man, you drive around, you ride horseback out there, and they're all over the place. Just all over, And what are they doing? They're looking for eggs. Damn little things, anyway. So the other thing that we did was when we got done grazing these steers out to a pretty good weight last year. We had them when they were about 600 pounds. We put on the average of about 350 pounds on them over the summer because we had really good grass. So we sorted the smaller ones out or the middle ones out and sent the smaller ones and the larger ones to the Carrington Research Center in Carrington, North Dakota, where they have feedlots there. And then these steers were put on a forage-based finishing diet. No grains, forages, like alfalfa, high nutrition forages. And so we really haven't got much back yet on that, but we're getting there. So that's basically I had to throw in the Cheyenne River. I had to. Yeah, Todd's going, yeah. This is where I grew up right here, right down south here. And Todd's place is just down the river and across there a little bit. But I can't ever give a presentation without showing how beautiful my home was. So with that then, I would accept any questions you might have. If you don't have any, that's fine. Any? Going once? Oh, yes, ma'am. You need to speak up, I'm hard of hearing.
I know, I'm coming to thank you. I have a question. My question is that you guys are concentrating a lot on beef and what beef will do to the natural grasslands. I was wondering if you can explain. I saw a PBS special and I have a recording. I DVR'd it on what the buffalo and the prairie dog do to bring back natural grasslands, especially our medicinal plants that we use for medicines. And so I just wanted to know how, if you can explain to us if there's ever going to be more studies or what your opinions are on our buffalo and the prairie dog, two medicines, our relatives, and the strong Rejuta for the elders back when we used to, singe them. I remember we go out hunting them. But I saw the special that said the two of them together can bring back
Yes, I'd be glad to talk about that because it encompasses so many different things. Part of what you were talking about was exactly what Todd was talking about on Todd's draw. Those hoof prints. There was a study down here that he participated in at the beef camp. It was those hoof marks that allow that water to penetrate into the soils. It also collects it as a miniature dam in the gumbo. But let me say this, I believe that you're right, you know. But today, our Indian people, like it or lump it, they like beef. And they like the nice, really fat, juicy steaks, okay? Like it or lump it, that's what it is. They like hamburger with that fat in it. I've been at places around Indian communities where we've provided taste samples at powwows, at gatherings, and we had beef and we had bison, and almost everybody liked the beef better. Okay, so like it or lump it, that's what we're faced with. So let me say this then, that if we like grass, or if we like beef so well these days, let us adopt grass-fed beef, because grass-fed animals of any kind are much better for our bodies than grain-fed animals, okay? And it's almost like a division line between domestic meats that are raised on grain, are high in fat, low in protein. You go on this side of the table, and all the wild meats that are like deer and bison and all that are grass-fed or Forbes-fed, they're all high in nutrition, high in protein, and low in fat. So how do we get from one to the other? The only way I know is to move the cattle over here to being grass-fed, and then we will get healthier. Okay? Believe me, because I've worked with the bison, especially for years and years here, and I was on the board of this bison project before it was killed by the council. Okay? I know my stuff when I talk about bison. And I know what you're talking about when you say that they eat native plants for their own medicinal usage. Vine Deloria came up with a term for that. Yeah, I can even say it. It's some what was it? Zoopharmacognosy. And you break that word down as like into Latin. You know how like when you was a kid you had to break down your words into Latin origins? Zoo, that means animals. Pharma means medicines. Cognosy means I know how to do it. I can figure it out in my mind. So animals, figuring out what medicines they need. I understand that. I understand that really well.